My name is Jeff Clark, and I'm the commander of the North Andover VFW. This year, the town of North Andover and our VFW have partnered with Wreaths Across America, an organization to honor the veterans of our beloved community. Wreaths Across America is an organization dedicated to remembering and honoring the veterans of the United States while educating our communities about the sacrifices made by our men and women in uniform. This year, we are placing over 1,500 wreaths at Ridgewood Cemetery on December 14th at 12 p.m. Each wreath costs $17, of which $5 comes back to the VFW. As a nonprofit organization, all proceeds will be utilized to support the veterans of our community and their needs. Please help us spread the word about this amazing organization and opportunity for this community. We hope you can make it to Ridgewood Cemetery on Saturday, December 14th at 12 p.m. for our opening ceremonies and immediately following the laying of the wreaths. This is a wonderful opportunity for our community to come together during the holiday season and ensuring that veterans are not forgotten.
Frank S. Guile, Landsman, United States Navy, Conflict, the Civil War. In war, no one sets out to be a hero. And yet, at the end of every deployment, every battle, every war, there are heroes, sung and unsung. In English, we have one word that stands apart from bravery, apart from gallantry, and apart from selflessness. Apart even from courage beyond the call of duty. Valor. In the United States, we recognize uncommon valor with the Medal of Honor. Not too far inside the main gate of Ridgewood Cemetery, there is a bronze plaque, flanked by flags on each side, with a 5-pointed star in the middle. Underneath is the name, Frank S. Guile. And below his name are the 3 inscribed words that read, Medal of Honor. For most of us, stories of the Civil War sit in the dim pages of our school books. Yet every so often, a story, once rediscovered, becomes riveting. So it is with the story of Frank S. Guile, Medal of Honor recipient for action in 1863 during the Civil War. A landsman was the lowest rank in the Navy. It is no longer used today, but the story we are about to hear was a story of yesteryear. The title was given to new recruits who performed menial tasks while learning their way around their ship and their naval service. In 1863, Landsman Frank Guile served aboard his ship, the USS Lehigh. The USS Lehigh was a Passaic-class monitor, an ironclad ship with a round turret on a flat deck, nicknamed a cheese box on a raft. Throughout 1863, during the blockade of southern ports, the Lehigh engaged shoreline forts regularly, taking part in several attacks. The most intense action came between late August and November. During that time, the USS Lehigh had run aground onto a sandbar and was under furious cannonball bombardment. Guile and his fellow volunteers took to sea in a wooden rowboat, which was actually the Lehigh's lifeboat, while under intense fire to tow a hawser to one ship that could pull them free. This was the 3rd attempt. The Medal of Honor citation for Frank S. Guile reads, "The President of the United States of America, in the name of Congress, takes pleasure in presenting the Medal of Honor to Landsman Frank S. Guile, United States Navy, for extraordinary heroism in action while serving on board the USS Lehigh, Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, 16 November 1863, during the hazardous task of freeing the Lehigh, which had been grounded and was under heavy enemy fire from Fort Moultrie. After several previous attempts had been made, Landsman Guile succeeded in passing a small boat from the Lehigh to the Nahant with a line bent on a hawser. This courageous action, while under severe enemy fire, enabled the Lehigh to be freed from her helpless position." End of citation. Thus, a teenage landsman, a rookie, undertook an action of incredible courage at extreme personal risk, and for this action, He and the 2 men who rode with him were awarded the Medal of Honor, as were the other crew members who had made the previous attempts. Just 8 weeks earlier, he had turned 16. Frank Guile served on 3 other ships before leaving the Navy. Upon his return home, he then re-upped, but not at sea. This time he joined the fabled 20th Maine Regiment, Joshua Chamberlain's storied regiment, as a substitute. Then he came home for good, his service to his nation complete. The Guile family tradition of service to the nation has continued into our time. Frank Guile's son Thomas served in World War I. His grandson, Joseph T. Guile Sr., served in World War II. His great-grandson, Joseph T. Guile Jr., served in the United States Marine Corps in Vietnam, where he was killed in action in 1966. He had been 20 for only a week. The Guile family has given much to the defense and freedom of our nation, and we owe them our deepest respect, sympathy, and gratitude. Our next segment will shift to World War I, where you will learn about Albert Thompson from Superintendent Greg Gilligan.
Hi, my name is Bill Dolan. I'm the coordinator for VFW Post 2104 in North Andover for the Wreaths Across America program this year. To access North Andover's event, using this website will allow individuals or groups of volunteers to register to place wreaths. We'd ask that one individual for any groups of volunteers identify themselves so that we can work with that one person rather than the whole group. This access can also be used to purchase wreaths, which are $17 each, and to designate a family member or significant person who may want to place the wreaths themselves. We need to raise $26,350 to purchase all the wreaths for the 1,550 veterans who are buried at the Ridgewood Cemetery. We need to raise this money by December 3rd. Wreaths Across America is dedicated to remember, honor, and teach about veterans. And this segment and the others in this series was created by North Andover CAM to help us reach out and do that. The theme for Wreaths Across America, encompassing nearly 4,500 communities across the country, who are laying veterans wreaths on December 14th, is Live with Purpose. The opening ceremony honors all branches of our military with a ceremonial wreath posted for each branch by an active or retired member of that branch, and a wreath to remember the POWs and MIAs. Wreaths will have been placed throughout the cemetery for the 1,550 veterans. If successful, we intend to include all North Andover cemeteries in future years. Live with purpose, and please participate on December 14th.
parade, Molly? Got your flag and everything? There's the Boy Scout, Cub Scout. Hey, Molly. Hold on. Chill here. You got two flags, huh? While they're waiting for the
How's it going?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dave Rubin, First Sergeant, United States Army retired, and Chairman of the North Andover Patriotic Observance Committee. Thank you all for joining us today. We told the rain to hold off. Let's hope and pray that it does. Although a wise man once told me, when it rains, the angels are crying. So is there a more fitting day? With this Memorial Day observance of 2024, we wanted to continue along the path of remembrance established last year and looking to our own town and the local heroes that gave their lives so that we could have a better life for ourselves and our posterity. I would be remiss if I also did not call your attention to the continuing series of vignettes, or as I like to call them from my AFN days back overseas, Profiles in Courage, that started airing in March on North Andover CAM and will continue through November as part of the Remember, Honor, and Teach pillars of the National Wreaths Across America program, coming to Ridgewood for the first time this December 14th, save the date. Sponsored by the North Andover VFW Post 2104. Please go to YouTube and Google or search North Andover Wreaths Across America to hear their stories and to learn how to donate. None of this could have been possible today without the hard work and tireless dedication of an all-volunteer Patriotic Observance Committee, and I would like to take a moment to thank all the committee members who helped make this happen. Please join me in a round of applause to thank these North Andover Patriots. At this time, I would like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, Joseph W. LeBlanc, Staff Sergeant, United States Army veteran, and Veteran Service Officer for the towns of North Andover and Boxford. Please welcome Joe LeBlanc.
Thank you, Dave. Today, as on every Memorial Day, our nation honors and pays tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation in time of war. Among the graves decorated with new flags here in our town cemeteries is the final resting place of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Our war dead gave their lives for their families and comrades, for their brothers and sisters in service, for their families, for the cities and towns, and for the nation. We owe them a debt that we can never repay. This year we thought it fitting that our guests of honor should be our veterans of all wars and conflicts. We also wanted to welcome the families of the fallen. Welcome to all of you joining us today. You are our guests of honor. At this time, we'd like to begin our ceremony. Host the colors. Thank you, North Andover Police Department Honor Guard. We'd like to now introduce representatives from North Andover High School Band under the direction of Justin Smalley. Please rise as they perform our national anthem. Thank you, North Andover High School Band. We now ask the North Andover Scouts to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Order! Arm!
Thank you, Scouts. Father Dealey, Commander, U.S. Navy, retired, and Global War veteran, will offer today's invocation. Father Dealey.
Please join me in prayer this morning. Gracious God, we thank you for the blessings of this day that give us the time to give thanks for the blessings we've received. As we remember those who have given their lives in the service of our country, may we never forget their sacrifice. We pray for peace and civility among all people. We pray for your blessing on our desire to continue to preserve our freedom. May you keep all who serve our country today in your care. Bless us now and always. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Father Dealey. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. At this time, I'd like to ask our committee chair, Dave Ruban, to return to the podium to deliver our keynote remarks. First, Art.
Good morning, North Andover.
Good morning, Dave.
Yeah, that was a little weak. Let's try that again. Good morning, North Andover. All right. Last Memorial Day, we received overwhelming positive feedback when I spoke about our Korean War fallen, Red Austin, Bob Wainwright, and Chet Crampton. We wanted to continue bringing the stories of our town's fallen to the forefront of our Memorial Day ceremonies. On Friday, we laid wreaths at all the town memorials and the playgrounds named for our fallen. This year, just like last year and every year, when we were laying the wreaths at both the Applin Playground and the Drummond Playground, families and visitors gave us puzzled looks and confused glances. When families bring children to play every day, they and many of our townsfolk have no idea of the stories behind the naming of our playgrounds or why we place wreaths there for Memorial Day. Today, I hope to captivate you, enrich your knowledge, and honor the two brave local heroes as we tell the stories behind these two playground names. Again, I have to warn you, I am going to talk for about 20 minutes, so get comfortable, have the rain umbrellas ready, but what a 20 minutes this will be, so stay with me, please. 82 years ago, in August of 1942, we named a playground for William Arthur Drummond, and in 1991, the year of the 50th anniversary of the dreaded Pearl Harbor attacks, we named another for James Raymond Applin. Both playgrounds are only yards away from the houses where they grew up. They are remembered in their own neighborhoods. Today, inside your program, on the left page, there is a familiar photo of James Raymond Applin, U.S. Navy Chief Water Tender, served on the USS Arizona, better known to his family as Jim. The little girl in the photo, on the mantle behind him, is his niece, then Ma Applin Murray, daughter of his sister. Next to her granny and granddad Applin, Uncle Jim was her fave. We rarely hear the recollections of the children growing up during World War II, but we have been very lucky to have the recollections of Ma Applin Murray Judge, who was just a little girl during the war, and whose memories of her uncle, Jim Applin, still shine. The world of a child in the wartime era seems to be an appropriate way to begin remarks on the theme of why playgrounds for children in North Andover have been named for our fallen. May, doing her bit for the war effort, had carrots in her victory garden. Carrots, she says. I loved carrots. She also had big ears and heard the grown-ups talking all the time. He was a handsome bastard. And with that, 92-year-old May Applin Murray Judges grins about her beloved Uncle Jim, better known to us as Chief Water Tender James R. Applin, one of the 1,177 sailors and Marines lost forever on the USS Arizona at 8 o'clock in the morning of December 7th, 1941. There is no doubt that Jim Applin was dearly loved by his entire family, and to this day, May's face lights up when she speaks of him. James Raymond Applin was born on April 23rd, 1904, just a year after his parents came here from England. And with like so many families making the transatlantic journey to a new land, his father, George Applin, came first in 1902, staying for a while in Bangor, Pennsylvania, with his own older sister, Lucy Applin Stancomb, who had come over just some years before. Soon after, his young wife, Charlotte Annie Applin, came to join him, and their two older children, George, who was 5, and Beatrice, who was 1. May describes her family as a big Navy family through and through. George Applin served in the Royal Navy on ironclads powered by coal and steam. He stayed his full 20 years in the Royal Navy, and when they were up, he took his pension and brought his family to this side of the ocean, heading inland to Pennsylvania, where his sister lived with her husband and a family in a region of silk mills, slate quarries, and farms, the same industries as those that they left in their part of England. He carried at least one lasting reminder of his time on His Majesty's ships. On his left forearm, near his wrist and hand, a tattoo read, "My True Love." For indeed, a lovely woman born in Ireland, Charlotte Annie Lehman, was his one true love. Soon, George and Annie came to North Andover, where George took up a job as a fireman at Davis and Ferber, which in those days meant worked in the boiler room. They, like many other mill and machine shop families, lived for many years in what we now call Machine Shop Village at 3 Clarendon Street. If you drive by 3 Clarendon Street today, the house looks like a tiny cottage. But on a spring day, with the new leaves unfurling, in the slanting light of late afternoon, and the river behind the house sparkling and dancing in glancing light, there is a proud, very pretty spot, and it's easy to think of Annie being content there. Across the way from them, on East Water Street, lived the Murray family. Beatrice Applin, Jim's older sister, grew up and married John Murray, who later worked for Hood Milk. The Murrays then had 2 daughters, the eldest, another Beatrice, and the eldest, another Beatrice called Bee, and then little May, who we've already talked about. May, some years younger than her big sister, was quieter and went to Johnson High School, where one of her classmates was Dave Dice Rand. After graduation, she lived at home and later married Homer Judge, who brought 2 daughters with him into their marriage. The girls were very little, and May became their mother. But before all that, in the early years on Clarendon Street, James came, born in 1904, the first U.S. citizen of the Applin family. During their time on Clarendon Street, 2 other significant events occurred. In the first, the Applins had a terrible sadness. In the year that Jim was 10, in 1914, on Christmas Day, his mother had a baby girl who lived only 2 days. She is buried here at Ridgewood in a pretty part of the older landscape called the infant section, where the graves have no headstones and the plots are very small. This must have been a very, very hard time for such a close family. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were well known for high infant mortality rates, but those bland phrases in history books tell nothing about the sadness of one family and one small boy just at Christmas. 3 years later, in 1917, his older brother, George Applin Jr., joined the United States Army and fought in World War I, where he was wounded in action in France. George survived the war. He came home to North Andover for a while, but soon moved to Pennsylvania near his dad's sister. His name is one of the ones on our World War I monument in Patriots Park. In 1923, at the age of 19, Jim Applin decided to join the U.S. Navy. The Applin boys, like many of their generation, stopped school after the 8th grade. They went to work on farms as delivery boys, pumping gas, doing odd jobs. Finally, at 18 or 19, they were in the mills and the machine shops, or they joined the service. Following in his father's footsteps, Jim joined the Navy. There was no war on the horizon, and a sailor who did his 20 years during peacetime could have a decent life and retire while still very young. Not long into his Navy years, though, however, the Great Depression had hit. By now, Jim was based on the West Coast in San Diego. Jim married his Mary Margaret Nichols in 1934 and bought a little house at 3711 47th Street in San Diego. George and Annie were getting older, so in 1935, they left New England and headed to California. And for them, what a brave new world it must have seemed. A climate of endless sunny days and security with Jim and his Margaret Mary, known to all as Peggy. And by now, Jim had reached a series of promotions. In 1941, his rank was Chief Water Tender. In terms we can understand, a water tender was a job critical to the running of the ship. Like his father before him, Jim was a boilerman, the U.S. Navy's newer oil-fired ships, and became the chief water tender on the USS Arizona. He carried a huge responsibility. His job meant both running a tight and disciplined crew and having exceptional knowledge, most particularly for the boiler system, for that steam system produced the immense pressure critical to keeping those huge propellers, called the screws, turning. Whatever water was needed all over the ship, from the galleys to the heads to the showers, all general plumbing and running water, Jim Applin had to know it all. And nothing, even nothing out of the ordinary. Even the hydraulic system on the ship required someone with his knowledge and skill. Most of it was a hot and dangerous work, far below the top deck. May even remembers his command voice pointing his finger the way he did and saying eyeball to eyeball, "I'm telling you," and then grinning from ear to ear. Despite some travails in her past, the Arizona of 1941 was known for being a tight and happy ship. Battleships were going in and out of Pearl Harbor, and they had a predictable routine. A week out to sea for drills and patrols, and then a week back in port for maintenance and repairs, replenishment of their munitions, restocking of provisions, furloughs for some of the crew, a steady routine of rotations in and out. By late November 1941, the Arizona was due for some repair work, so she did her last nighttime patrol on December 4th. Then she was docked for repairs, waiting for them to begin, with the USS Vestal tied up alongside her to facilitate the work. What that meant on December 7th was the Arizona was boxed in. And as deadly Japanese fleet grew closer in its stealth crossing from Japan, no one in Honolulu or at Pearl Harbor suspected any danger until it was too late. Honolulu was a beautiful liberty town, and every old black and white film of the pre-war Honolulu shows a bright, clean, prosperous, tropical city where most of the bustling pedestrians were in uniforms. That weekend presaged nothing out of the ordinary. Men were on leave, enjoying what seemed to be a regular weekend of relaxation in bars and restaurants, band concerts, dances, and dates, and there was at least one wedding. Although the winds of war were becoming insistent, virtually no one foresaw an attack by Japan on Pearl Harbor. However, the Japanese had studied for months ways to attack Pearl Harbor from a route no one had predicted. from across the Pacific well to the north of Hawaii, and then a sharp last-moment turn down towards the islands, with Oahu in their sights. It was extremely dangerous, for the northern Pacific was stormy and cold, and radio silence was maintained for the entire crossing until virtually the last moments before the attack, which, as we now know, saw successive waves of aircraft launched on an unsuspecting island on a bright Sunday morning. It was brilliant and unfathomably terrible, and it succeeded. We could speak about the destruction of the ships on Battleship Row, about the famous photo of the impenetrable black smoke rising from the horribly listing Arizona, the flames on oily waters, the desperate and often fruitless rescue attempts, about the destruction of Hickams Field's airplanes and runways, about the scrambling servicemen on what would have been a fine Sunday morning of weekend leave, suddenly driving and cramming themselves into any vehicle they could get to speed to the docks to help and grab first sight of that hellish catastrophe that had unfolded in front of them. In an hour and 15 minutes, they lost their whole world and most of their hopes. They lost their ships, they lost their planes, they lost their crewmates and their closest friends, with some of their own brothers lost. We know the headlines screamed war the next day, and we know Roosevelt made his famous Day of Infamy speech and the declaration of war. But here, we are remembering the tension, the fear, and the worry around kitchen tables, the long wait for news, the news that families already knew in their sinking hearts, with grief so profound there were no words then, and there are no words now. Oil droplets still rise from the Arizona, drop by drop, making their way to the surface, as though the ship is still mourning her crew, weeping tears of the deepest black. To this day, they are known as Arizona's tears. The Arizona lost 1,177 of its 1,700-man crew. Since that terrible morning, only 105 have been recovered and identified, and 1,072 remain unrecovered and missing. George and Annie and Peggy lost their Jim that Sunday morning. No one knew better than George the dangers of a boiler room blast, never mind a blast that involved explosive munitions and tanks full of oil. Even if by some miracle Jim was not 6 levels below the surface in the boiler rooms, even if he had been on the deck for a quick break to take a look at Pearl from his perch before heading below, or wrapping up breakfast, swallowing his last bites of chow, or polishing down the last of his coffee before morning colors, it was all over in an instant. And if anyone knew it, it was George. And if George knew, they all knew. Hope against hope. Long before they received any official word, they knew that their Jim was gone. The story told on the dedication page of the 1991 North Andover Town Report is that Jim Applin was due for leave that weekend, but he swapped leave so a shipmate aboard the Arizona could go off and get married. Although in no way does that comforting thought mitigate the terror and destruction of that morning, it is somewhat comforting to know that Jim Applin's last recorded act might have been doing a fond kindness for a friend, swapping leave with a shipmate who just wanted to get married on a beautiful Hawaiian weekend. It is also comforting to think that Jim Applin was just as good a decent man, and maybe even a guy with a twinkle in his eye when he waved his pal off to get hitched. And May herself, well in her 90s, May has done one last thing for her Uncle Jim. There are 85 sets of unidentified remains from the Arizona in the Punch Bowl. Lying among the serried ranks of stones, a great monument that lists the names of the missing. At the Arizona Memorial, every missing crew member is listed as still standing watch on eternal patrol. James Applin's name is there. Recently, there's been an endeavor to start a process of identifying some of those 85 unidentified remains. The chances of any of them being Jim Applin are remote, but May Applin, his last remaining close relative, was eager to swab her cheeks and send her DNA samples to the DPAA, just in case. She is old now, but when she smiles, she is young again, and her heart still shines with love for her favorite uncle. She too is seeing out her last years with one great good deed, just in case. That handsome bastard has left her, and us, with a legacy of love and loyalty we should never, ever forget. All right, here we go. 4 months after Pearl Harbor, North Andover received the dreaded word that would soon touch every neighborhood in this town. The war came home again, and we lost another one of our own in a faraway place. The worlds of Jim Applin and Bill Drummond were very different, at least on the surface. In 1941, the Applins lived on one side of 125, the Drummonds on the other. Bill Drummond's family had been local for several generations, and they came to North Andover from Lawrence in the early 1930s with their 4 children, settling in the old center. By 1939, their daily routine was tightly woven into the North Parish Church and a part of town that was like a village, a quiet cluster of homes and farms that marked the beginning of Outcountry. But only minutes away from the gigantic Davis and Ferber machine shop and textile behemoths of Lawrence, the pastoral and the industrial separated by a river, mills, farms, and the Merrimack. Here in Ridgewood Cemetery, off a narrow lane lined with trees that flower right around this time at Memorial Day, there is a stone marked Drummond. The inscription gives the birth and death years of Ruth and Arthur Drummond, and then there is an inscription for Bill that simply reads PFC William A. Drummond, 1917 to 1942, buried in Hawaii. And in Hawaii, not too far from where Jim Applin's remains lie, at the USS Arizona, there is another cemetery and another stone, both far from the hometown Jim Applin and Bill Drummond shared. On the flat marker in the National Cemetery of the Pacific, situated in a hollow of a long dead volcanic crater called the Punch Bowl, there is this: William A. Drummond, Massachusetts, PFC 101 Med Regiment, 26th Infantry Division, World War II. So we ask, how did we get from here to there? And why didn't he come home? The answer, as it turns out, is directly related to the horrific attack on Pearl Harbor. Jim Applin was our first casualty of World War II, and Bill Drummond was our second, only 4 months later. Bill Drummond grew up in a yellow house at 38 Salem Street, although for a little while his family had lived in one of the small houses closer to the hay scales. From 38 Salem Street, they could look straight across a few feet of Salem Street to the open triangle where a new fire station now sits. Bill and his dad played catch together there. From the front room, they could also see straight across to the center school that Bill had attended, to what we all now know as Drummond Playground. Bill grew up with 2 sisters and a brother named for their father. His father, Arthur Drummond Sr., worked variously for mills, but is most often associated with the North Parish Church, where for decades he was the sexton, a post that has also been called, less formally, the caretaker. At this time, kids invented their own games. They climbed trees, they walked on stone walls, they fished from poles cut with saplings, used string and safety pin for a hook, and night crawlers for bait. They rode bikes if they were lucky enough to have one, or they caged rides if not. They played pickup ball games and brought penny candy at the general store, where an old index card file on the counter held their mother's accounts, settled on payday, for bread or milk, or baby food, or the Sunday paper. Around the 4th of July, families could spread picnic blankets on the common, or swat mosquitoes where they watched ball games on that low, flat field that has a diamond, and a neutral bleacher section on the slope that drops off the Milk Street and Johnson Street sides of the playing field. You guys are used to sledding down that one. Arthur and Bill Drummond loved those games. One of the young Bill Drummond's goals was to get a full playground at the old center, and as he grew older, he became a member of the Grange and Center Playground Association. He was active in his community very early. It was a different world, even though many of the landmarks haven't changed much since then. Still there, the old white church with the clock face just below the steeple, the Revere bell tolling its hours, the general store red brick building. I think you guys go to an ice cream store in that building now. The hay scales, the Grange building, the Masonic Lodge, the big red barn, and the row of small houses that dot the narrow sidewalk up from the hay scales to the corner of Stevens Street and Salem Street. Our parade today just marched by Bill Drummond's house, as it does every Memorial Day for years. For many kids in the Depression, to go to high school was a privilege. Bill was one of the lucky ones. He went to Johnson High and then graduated in the class of 1934. In his Johnson High School yearbook photos, Bill looked serious and a studious man. His activities were bookish, the literary magazine and the class prophecy. Yet his senior photo inscription pokes sly fun at his wit and perseverance. It also calls him the little big man with the big heart. The little man with the big heart. The class prophecy, which he wrote, opens with a description of his future self as a whiz golfer encountering classmates at the country club where he stood a round of pink ribbon beer, that's the cheapest one, for a couple pals and spent some time lounging around the wicker porch chairs where a succession of classmates wandered through in various stages of their lives and careers. A kid who openly opens a class prophecy with a knockoff blue ribbon beer and enjoying a few cold ones with a few pals only a few years after the end of Prohibition, what is not as unworldly as what would be expected of this bespectacled young man who grew up in the shadow of a church steeple. Behind those rimless spectacles, though, was an highly observant, really good kid, rapidly on his way to manhood. During and after high school, he stayed active in his push for the establishment of a playground in the old center. And he was kind. His family, like the Applins, was very close and loving. Their motto was one for all and all for one. During the Depression, Bill did good, quiet deeds for his family, and when times were tough, he pitched in to help with the family budget. And sometimes he picked up small gifts for his brothers and sisters and their father and mother to keep their spirits up. The world where war was gathering might have seemed remote to a kid who grew up in a family whose life revolved around a white steepled church and a pretty slow pace in the outcountry neighborhood of a small town, but that was far from true. In January 1941, Bill Drummond filled out his draft registration card, and a week after that, enlisted in the Massachusetts National Guard. The Mass National Guard is the oldest in the country. Bill was assigned to the 101st Medical Regiment of the famed 26th Infantry Division, otherwise known as the Yankee Division. Immediately after the attack on Pearl Harbor, all National Guard units across the country were activated into the regular Army. Anything Bill Drummond might have expected when he joined up in January of 1941 suddenly went in a direction he could never have anticipated. December 7th, 1941 had changed everything. As a result of the Pearl Harbor attack, key strongholds in the Pacific required urgent protection. We needed another division, and speed was of the essence assembling it. There were two options: to use existing divisions, thereby somewhat depleting our forces ready for deployment to Europe, or take a riskier route of plucking National Guard units from across the country and using them to assemble a division-like task force and sending it into the Pacific theater quickly. Roosevelt and the chiefs picked the latter. Guard units from all over the country were notified they were being moved to Task Force 6814, a top-secret operation. Soon they were on the move to the East Coast, then it was on to Brooklyn, and then on to transport ships. Bill Drummond was in the thick of it because his unit, the 101st Medical Regiment, was among the very first called into this new task force. The 101st included several men from the Merrimack Valley and at least one other from North Andover. On January 23rd, just 46 days after Pearl Harbor, and less than 10 days after this plan was approved, 7 ships of Task Force 6814, including Bill Drummond's ship, the Santa Elena, slipped away from Brooklyn under the cover of darkness. About their final destination, though, there was nothing, not a word. Cramming 17,000 hastily assembled troops with their single duffel bags of personal gear and all the food, supplies, and cargo they would need in their still secret destination had been an exercise in controlled chaos. The idea was to get the ships off the docks and out to sea as speedily as possible and do the sorting out later. Boy, things haven't changed much, huh? The voyage to Panama was sometimes very uncomfortable, but the men did their best to keep morale high. On the other side of the canal, however, the 35-day zigzag journey to Australia was another story. Ships ran low on food. The men got only 2 meals a day. They ran low on water, 1 canteen each per day. Any washing was done in salt water. The ships were essentially on lockdown at night with the portholes blocked. The conditions were stifling. All the ships became perfect incubators for disease. They had left Brooklyn in cold and flu season. Pneumonia had hit. Dysentery broke out. Sickness, seasickness bedeviled the men. They all lost weight. Inevitably, some of the men became quite ill. On February 27th, after a grueling 35-day-long journey, the men arrived in Melbourne, filthy, gaunt, sick, and glad of air, dry land, and a chance to clean up and chow down. Because there was no base big enough to house these thousands of soldiers disembarking from these crammed ships, they were dispersed to several Australian towns. Australians in droves welcomed men into their homes, and in the short weeks they were there, lifetime friendships were formed. When the Americans bade farewell to the wonderful Australian hosts on March 6th, they knew, or had figured out, where they were headed, to New Caledonia, codenamed Poppy. But even then, although the RPMs of the rumor mills were flying, none of the men knew of the Poppy Force. They were permitted to say a word to anyone back home. Secrecy ruled to the moment they steamed into Nomia's harbor, and the men clambered over the side, swarming down cargo nets to put their feet onto the soil of this beautiful island, so critical to the defense of the Southern Pacific. In all this, Bill Drummond hoped to establish an evacuation station and a station hospital, setting up supplies and equipment. Over the next 8 weeks in Namia, 16 U.S. servicemen died in a non-combat area. One was ours. On April 12, 1942, the unthinkable happened. Bill's story ended. The little man with the big heart died suddenly of heart failure. Although there are many possible causes, and heart failure has been a common cause of death in warfare, to this day we have no idea what caused his heart to fail. And most likely, we will never know. He was 25 and had been in New Caledonia for just 22 days. Out of the blue, a North Andover family who had heard so recently from their son that he was doing fine and loving Australia received the shocking news that he had died of sudden heart failure. Even harder was the news that his body could not be repatriated until the cessation of hostilities. That basically meant to the end of the war. So Bill Drummond was buried first overseas, second after the war at Schofield Barracks on Oahu, and finally, when it was readied, in his final resting place in the Punch Bowl, that great cemetery that sits in the crater of an extinct volcano. Our town expressed its collective grief and bedrock patriotism in 3 events. The North Parish Church held a memorial for Bill Drummond only 3 weeks after his death at 10:30 a.m. in the morning of May 3rd, 1942. Over 300 people attended. The spare white walls and those tall, clear windows and classic pews with needlepoint kneelers opened itself to a family, a congregation, and those who wished to console Bill Drummond's family and honor the young man of great heart who left so many townspeople heartsick at his loss. Then in late May, close to Memorial Day, the town held a huge parade and patriotic ceremony. Ruth Drummond, Bill's mother, and Beatrice Applin Murray, Jim Applin's sister, were among the honored guests. And then finally came the great summer day of August 29th, the dedication of the Center Playground in William A. Drummond's memory. The dedication was followed by an afternoon of sports and play on this new playground and playing field. Key figures in town and Bill's family took part in the ceremony. In addition to the naming of the playground, the members of the Playground Association Committee had voted to go further and erect a stone monument in Bill's memory. The granite monolith had once been part of the center school. After weeks of work, it stood upright on a concrete base surrounded by granite curbing. The site had been graded and seeded, and a bronze tablet bearing the words Drummond Memorial Playground was installed on the stone. This memorial originally stood at the edge of the playground near Milk Street, although it was later moved away from the edge of the street to protect it from snowplow damage. This is where it stands today, and in that installation, Ira Carty made sure to install a bubbler for all the hot and thirsty kids who could now play in a playground that Bill Drummond had worked so hard for. Sometime after its memorial service, the North Parish Church received a letter from New Caledonia, from Norman S. Bent, one of the men in Bill's unit. Norman came from Methuen. His sister Ruth, who was also at the service, later married a man named McAvoy and became a beloved figure active in the old center. Many of us remember Ruth McAvoy with great fondness. Another young man in the unit was James Stewart. No, not the famous actor, but another fellow from North Andover. The men of the unit, so many from right around here and so loyal to their fallen comrade, requested that a pew in the North Parish Church be named the William A. Drummond Memorial Pew for the Drummond family's use, and that a suitable small memorial plaque be mounted in this pew. The men had taken up a collection to defray the cost of the plaque. Not long afterward, a small varnished wooden plaque was mounted in pew number 43, where it still is to this day. A photo of that plaque is on the inside page of your program. Under a heraldic eagle, enclosed in a halo, behind which is a star, and below is an open book, the words "In Memoriam." And the plaque reads, PFC William A. Drummond, born November 10th, 1917, died in New Caledonia, April 12th, 1942, given by his comrades of the 101st Medical Regiment, United States Army Expeditionary Force. Now we know his story. Many grew up here seeing Ruth and Arthur Drummond on those hot summer days long ago. They drank long slurps of water from the bubbler next to Bill's monument, and all of us can still visit the church and find pew number 43 and read the plaque from his New Caledonia, Massachusetts, and North Andover friends. The small town where the little man with the big heart grew up had its own big heart. There and here, we are reminded of that to this day. These stories of these men should become cherished parts of our town's history. Carry the legacy forward. Carry these stories with you when you leave, and tell your children the stories of whom their playgrounds are so aptly named. We'll tell more stories, but for now, from their home ground, we salute Chief Water Tender James R. Applin and PFC William A. Drummond, and we thank them.
Thank you, Dave. We'd like to now turn to the proclamation of the town of North Andover, recognizing the fallen from all wars and those two local heroes that you just heard about. Please welcome Laura Bates, Chair of the North Andover Select Board.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. Whereas the town of North Andover wishes to honor and pay tribute each year on Memorial Day to the fallen of all wars from our town, and whereas we are mindful that there are many stories from our town of the sacrifices of our fallen, and whereas we wish that all our citizens, especially our children, will know the names of our playgrounds and playing fields of honor in perpetuity to the sacrifice of those who defended with their very lives the peerless cause of liberty and left us all the legacy of our precious freedoms. And whereas today we are particularly remember Chief Water Tender James R. Applin, United States Navy, who died on the USS Arizona on December 7th, 1941, during the attack on Pearl Harbor on that date, which will live in infamy. And whereas we wish to recall to our town's memory the story of Private First Class William A. Drummond, who was the first of our youth to die in the newly declared World War II, only 4 months after Pearl Harbor on April 10th, 1942, in New Caledonia, a place very far from home. And whereas we wish to remind our citizens that James R. Applin Memorial Playground and Drummond Memorial Playground are named for these men who fell long ago, but remain bright in our memories. Now, therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of North Andover, do hereby dedicate this Memorial Day 2024 as a day of reflection and remembrance in honor of Chief Water Tender James R. Applin, United States Navy, and Private First Class William A. Drummond, U.S. Army, and all our fallen who have given their lives for the freedoms we cherish. In witness, we have set our hands and caused To be affixed the seal of Town of North Andover on this 27th day of May, 2024.
Commander Jeff Clark, VFW Post 2104, receives a proclamation. Thank you, Laura. We now turn to the recognition portion of our program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take a moment to honor a Gold Star family member and the only living descendant of James R. Applin, May Applin Murray Judge. May could not be here with us today, but we will be presenting her with the proclamation that you just heard, and also declared remembrance of her loved one in defense of our nation, and a small token of remembrance. I understand there's a descendant of the Drummond family here too as well. Am I correct? Yes. Sir, could you please come forward and receive our town's challenge coin, please? Now I'd like to ask Father Dearly to come join me up here at the podium. Father Dearly has been part of our Memorial Day and Veterans Day ceremonies for many years. He is departing St. Michael's Parish at the end of the month. After 13 years, from 1995 to 2011, he was a Navy chaplain, serving in Japan, Italy, and Iraq. He served on 3 ships, including the USS Blue Ridge, the flagship of the 7th Fleet, and with the 5th Marines in Fallujah in 2006. We know Father Dearly is a modest and humble man who slips in and out of our ceremonies without any fanfare, delivering invocations and benedictions that spring from a life of service as both a clergyman and a veteran. Father Dearly, you have a standing invitation to come back to our ceremonies whenever you wish. There will always be a seat here for you. Before you leave on your next adventure, it's our distinct honor to privilege to present to you on behalf of the Patriotic Observance Committee and the town of North Andover is just a small thank you for your years of service to the committee and to the town. Please accept this. Here you go. Also, the VFW has upgraded you to a lifetime member. VFW Commander Jeff Clark will now present to you a lifetime membership card. We wish you fair winds and following seas. Godspeed, sir. Godspeed, sir. At this time, we'd like to call to the podium our committee student representative, high school student and Eagle Scout Will Guggenberger, who will deliver our patriotic reading. Will, do you have a copy?
Found as a newspaper clipping in a wartime envelope belonging to a World War II Marine veteran, a young woman felt very keenly about the young man who emptied out of neighborhoods to go to war and never came home. She told of a story coming into a train station one evening after a 3-day furlough and walking past troops waiting to board outbound trains. Some sitting on duffels, some standing, others leaning against the station walls. There wasn't much conversation as she picked her way along the platform. She was headed to her quarters and would be in a base office at her typewriter in the morning light. And in that same morning light, these young men would have spent the night on a train on their way somewhere to fight. Like many other young men of that era who served, she was very much aware that her joining meant that she had, quote, freed a man to fight. And she, like others, felt a certain amount of guilt that they themselves were safe, but the men who'd held the desks before them wouldn't be. She kept this poem for the rest of her life. The Young Dead Soldiers Do Not Speak by Archibald McLash. The young dead soldiers do not speak. Nevertheless, they are heard in the still houses. Who has not heard them? They have a silence that speaks for them at night, and when the clock counts, they say, "We were young. We have died. Remember us." They say, "We have done what we could, but until it is finished, it is not done." They say, "We have given our lives, but until it is finished, no one can know what our lives gave." They say, "Our deaths are not ours, they are yours. They will mean what you make them." They say, whether our lives and our deaths were for peace and a new hope, or for nothing, we cannot say. It is you who must say this. They say, "We leave you our deaths. Give them their meaning." "We were young," they said. "We have died. Remember us." Thank you.
Thank you, Will. This is also Will's last reading as part of this committee. He will be graduating from St. John's Prep and heading off to Providence College to join the Army ROTC program this fall. It's noteworthy to mention that Will is the last of the Guggenberger children that will have served as our student representative, joining his brother Joseph and his sister Amy in retirement. Please join me in thanking the entire Guggenberger family for their years of service. Stand up, guys. No? Right on. Will, on behalf of the Patriotic Observance Committee and the town of North Andover, we wanted to present you with this certificate of appreciation. Here.
Thank you.
And my office's challenge coin as well.
Thank you.
Good job. Don't go far.
Many may or may not know, based on the age of your children, Joe and I go to the North Andover High School graduation in uniform, and we present a special certificate to any of those students joining the armed forces. So since you decided not to go to North Andover High and went to St. John's Prep, I'm going to present that very certificate to you that I'll be presenting Friday. On behalf of the North Andover Patriotic Observance Committee, the Veterans Service Office, and the town of North Andover, we extend our warmest congratulations on your graduation from St. John's Preparatory School, class of 2024, and your decision to become a part of the proud tradition of our nation's military forces. Will Guggenberger, United States Army, ROTC, Providence College.
Go Army. Congratulations, Will. Go Army. Today, we are deeply honored and humbled to call attention to and begin our honor roll. We ask that you remain in silence while I read the names of our deceased veterans from the past year. Joseph Bornstein, James Entwistle, Byron Benson II, Richard Alzimo, James Walsh, Ernest Franconi, Christopher Geralducci, Alan Dearman, Virgilio Hernandez, Vincent Tyler, William Harrington, Jeremiah Harrington, Richard Fain, Kenneth McDonald, Walter Corcoran, Bryant George Stevens, Gerald Barth, Robert Sable, Joseph Tornami, Raymond Barker, William Holleran, David Ruan, Stephen Calick, Charles Hersey Jr., Alfred Sotera, Luis DeLucia, John Heisland, Santo Bonacorso, Robert Leland, Elmwood Bent Jr., Kenneth Connors, James Pearson, Bayard Smith, John Newberry, Rolf Trevisian, James McElvoy, John Mulcahy Sr., Mariel Kenny, John Driscoll, John Monks, Wayne Merceau, John Bozick III, Ervil Beaumont, James Sheridan, John Cena, Calvin Hooper, John Reese. And now we would like to call up high school junior Christina Jameson, a chorus student under the direction of Sarah Durkin. Christina will be singing Mansions of the Lord, a solemn hymn for the fallen.
To fallen soldiers let us sing, where no rockets fly, nor bullets swing. Our broken brothers let us spring to the mansions of the Lord. No more bleeding, no more fight, no prayers pleading through the night, just divine embrace, eternal light in the mansions of the Lord, where no mothers cry and no children weep. We will stand and guard, though the angels sleep. All through the ages safely keep the mansions of the Lord.
Thank you, Christina. At this time, North Andover veterans of foreign wars, Post 2104 Rifle Guard, will conduct a rifle salute in honor of all our war dead, followed immediately by taps. We ask that you please stand and remain silent during both. Thank you, North Andover Post 2104 and the North Andover High School Band Trumpeters. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing. Father Daly returns to deliver our benediction. Commander.
Gracious God, we ask your blessing and thank you for the opportunity to gather today to remember the supreme sacrifice of the fallen. May we never forget their sacrifice and the sacrifice of their families. Keep us always in your care. Watch over our troops today, and we pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Father Daly. We will now retire the colors. Retire the colors.
Detail. Right. Face. Forward. March.
Thank you, North Andover Police Department Honor Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. This concludes our ceremony. For those of you who have family members or friends that cannot be here with us today in person, this program will play a few more times later on local access channels, or visit the Veterans Services webpage, where this ceremony and all of our previous ceremonies can be viewed thanks to North Andover Cam TV, who we again want to thank for their tireless support. This observance could not have been put together without support from so many people from North Andover who cherish our veterans, our scouts, North Andover High School faculty and staff, town officials, North Andover DPW, local law enforcement professionals, and many others. We also want to thank Veteran Service Officer Jillian Kemp for procuring the wreaths that have been laid this weekend at memorials throughout the town. And finally, we'd like to thank Ridgewood Cemetery Superintendent Scott Palumbo and his staff and the trustees for the work they do to make the cemetery as beautiful as it is every year for Memorial Day. You are cordially invited to the reception at noon at the VFW. We also want to remind you that the Field of Honor is once again running through June 15th over at the Town Common, run by the Exchange Club of Lawrence and the Andovers. Donations in the form of one of the full-size flags on display will be given to the participant's designated hero or family member at the completion of the event, and are available on-site and online. The event culminates with a special Flag Day ceremony on-site, 10 a.m. to noon on Saturday, June 15th. Finally, Sunday, June 9th at 2 p.m. here at Ridgewood Cemetery, my office, in conjunction with Cub Scout Pack 89, Troop 87, will be conducting a flag retirement ceremony. All are invited to attend, as well as bring any flags that are no longer serviceable. May God bless our veterans. May He bless and protect those who continue to serve in harm's way today. May He bless those who have laid down their lives for our nation, including those that never returned and are forever remembered by this monument. And may He bless all their families who cherish and honor them to this day. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great weekend, everyone.
My name is Jeff Clark, and I'm the commander of the North Andover VFW. This year, the town of North Andover and our VFW have partnered with Wreaths Across America, an organization to honor the veterans of our beloved community. Wreaths Across America is an organization dedicated to remembering and honoring the veterans of the United States while educating our communities about the sacrifices made by our men and women in uniform. This year, we are placing over 1,500 wreaths at Ridgewood Cemetery on December 14th at 12 p.m. Each wreath costs $17, of which $5 comes back to the VFW. As a nonprofit organization, all proceeds will be utilized to support the veterans of our community and their needs. Please help us spread the word about this amazing organization and opportunity for this community. We hope you can make it to Ridgewood Cemetery on Saturday, December 14th at 12 p.m. for our opening ceremonies and immediately following the laying of the wreaths. This is a wonderful opportunity for our community to come together during the holiday season and ensuring that veterans are not forgotten.
Private Albert E. Thompson, United States Army, 101st Infantry, 26th Yankee Division. Hi, my name is Dr. Greg Gilligan, and I am the superintendent of the North Andover Public Schools and the former proud principal of the Private Albert E. Thompson Elementary School. Private Albert E. Thompson grew up at 60 Waverly Road here in North Andover, and the Thompson School was built in 1924 in his honor on Waverly Road, formerly known as Railroad Ave. Private Albert E. Thompson entered the United States Army with the 101st and 26th Yankee Division at age 16. That's right, 16 years old, and was killed fighting the Germans in the Belleau Woods 3 months shy of his 17th birthday. Today, he's laid to rest in Ain Marne American Cemetery. This cemetery is at the foot of the Belleau Woods, and in this cemetery, 2,289 U.S. soldiers of the 10 divisions who fell during the fighting around Chateau Thierry in the summer of 1918 are laid to rest. Private Albert E. Thompson was killed in action on July 1st, 1918. I had the opportunity to go to France and visit Ain Marne Cemetery back in 2014. Here's a picture of Private Albert E. Thompson. After my visit, I presented at the Thompson School. The press covered it, and all of a sudden, we had people saying, Private Albert E. Thompson is a relative of mine. And they sent us this wonderful photo, which now hangs in the office of the Private Albert E. Thompson School at 266 Waverly Road. This here is the Western Union telegram sent to Private Albert E. Thompson's mother upon his passing. You see, it was originally sent to a farm in Amesbury, and it took probably about 4 months to make the notification to his mother that he was killed in action by the time it made it back to 60 Railroad Avenue, now Waverly Road, between Maple Avenue and Main Street. In the 1920s that is, the French government paid for Gold Star mothers such as Miss Thompson to go over to France and to see where her son was buried. And that's Mrs. Thompson here. Here is a picture of our main cemetery in Belleau Woods that I snapped from the main church chapel on the grounds. This is another church in the cemetery, and what's interesting about this church, it's a Catholic church, and in between some of the fighting, troops from the 26th Yankee Division would go here to pray. At the end of the war, it was in tough shape. There was fierce fighting that summer of 1918. And at the front of the church, they actually have this right by the door. They have the 26th Yankee Division symbol badge representing the folks from the United States that fought there and lost their lives there. At the end of the war, the superintendent of the cemetery told me that all of the troops from the 26th Yankee Division gave 1 day's pay to set up a fund to maintain this church in perpetuity, and quite a tribute to the soldiers that never came home. Private Albert E. Thompson's name is inscribed inside the church, and I had an opportunity to go in to see it. And we're thankful for his service and for his family's sacrifice. And although he was killed over 100 years ago in World War I, the children of this community celebrate his legacy every Veterans Day with a big Veterans Day ceremony at the Thompson School. And local veterans come back from all conflicts and wars and speak, and it is quite a tribute to a well-deserving legacy of sacrifice for our country with one of North Andover's own.
Hi, my name is Bill Dolan. I'm the coordinator for VFW Post 2104 in North Andover for the Wreaths Across America program this year. To access North Andover's event, using this website will allow individuals or groups of volunteers to register to place wreaths. We'd ask that one individual for any groups of volunteers identify themselves so that we can work with that one person rather than the whole group. This access can also be used to purchase wreaths, which are $17 each, and to designate a family member or significant person who may want to place the wreaths themselves. We need to raise $26,350 to purchase all the wreaths for the 1,550 veterans who are buried at the Ridgewood Cemetery. We need to raise this money by December 3rd. Wreaths Across America is dedicated to remember, honor, and teach about veterans. And this segment and the others in this series was created by North Andover CAM to help us reach out and do that. The theme for Wreaths Across America, encompassing nearly 4,500 communities across the country who are laying veterans wreaths on December 14th, is Live with Purpose. The opening ceremony honors all branches of our military with a ceremonial wreath posted for each branch by an active or retired member of that branch, and a wreath to remember the POWs and MIAs. Wreaths will have been placed throughout the cemetery for the 1,550 veterans. If successful, we intend to include all North Andover cemeteries in future years. Live with purpose, and please participate on December 14th.
My name is Jeff Clark, and I'm the commander of the North Andover VFW. This year, the town of North Andover and our VFW have partnered with Wreaths Across America, an organization to honor the veterans of our beloved community. Wreaths Across America is an organization dedicated to remembering and honoring the veterans of the United States while educating our communities about the sacrifices made by our men and women in uniform. This year, we are placing over 1,500 wreaths at Ridgewood Cemetery on December 14th at 12 p.m. Each wreath costs $17, of which $5 comes back to the VFW. As a nonprofit organization, all proceeds will be utilized to support the veterans of our community and their needs. Please help us spread the word about this amazing organization and opportunity for this community. We hope you can make it to Ridgewood Cemetery on Saturday, December 14th at 12 p.m. for our opening ceremonies and immediately following the laying of the wreaths. This is a wonderful opportunity for our community to come together during the holiday season and ensuring that veterans are not forgotten.
Ma Balmer. In the Ridgewood Cemetery, across from the Longfellow Road sign, is the gravestone of Lance Corporal James St. Cyr, who died in Vietnam. Behind that gravestone, in the 6th row back, you will see an upright marble military gravestone curved at the top. It is the resting place of Maud I. Balmer, Army Corps nurse. On 30 March 1918, at the age of 34, Maud I. Balmer enlisted in the United States Army. She was discharged on 27 August 1919. In that year and 5 months, she had crossed the Atlantic on a U.S. Army transport on 23 November 1918 as a nurse, with the Corps of Nurses assigned to Base Hospital Number 7. They were going to the Great War, WW1, and would be treating soldiers near the front line. Maud had received her nurse's training at the Lawrence General Hospital and graduated from the program on 12 September 1915. As a part of that graduation ceremony, Maud received her nursing cap and pin from the Lawrence General. She wore that pin on her military uniform when she served overseas. A notation on the Lawrence General Hospital website regarding Maud and their nursing program states, Maud Balmer is a notable figure in the history of the hospital, Lawrence General Hospital. She was the director of the School of Nursing at the hospital. The Lawrence General School of Nursing provided clinical instruction in nursing until 1977, and its 1,500 alumni have played a vital role in supporting the health of the region. Nurse Maud was born 26 April 1884 and died 25 February 1983, 2 months shy of her 99th birthday. I will now read a short article from the Lawrence Eagle Tribune written by Mary Fitzgerald sometime before June of 1977, when the nursing program ended at the General. Women in action. All her life, Maud Balmer was a nurse's nurse. Caring for the sick had been her big ambition ever since she was a tiny girl. Now 94 and a patient at the Henry C. Nevins Home, it is the proudest accomplishment of her long, fruitful lifetime. She always said that graduating from Lawrence General Hospital School of Nursing over 70 years ago was one of the biggest things that ever happened to her. She was extremely proud of the cap and pin she received at the ceremony back on September 12, 1915. She wore the pin proudly on her uniform when she served overseas as an Army nurse during World War I. When the war ended, she exchanged the uniform for the stiffly starched gown and cap that was always kept a pristine white. The pin was always bright and prominently displayed. She went back to her old hospital, Lawrence General, and soon became night supervisor. This meant being in charge of the whole hospital from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. If she encountered any problems, or if a nurse had any, Maud solved them herself. This was true within the hospital. I tried never to report a nurse, she said. If anything came up, I handled it and it went no further. It was also true outside the hospital. Nurses who were in training at the time still recall how Maud was up to handling just about any emergency. One night, the girls were frightened by a prowler lurking outside the nursing home. Maud went charging out, apprehended him, and held on to him until the police came. No one bothers my nurses, she declared. 50 years ago, Maud retired as a supervisor and went into private duty nursing. Here she also excelled. Those who served with her recalled that Maud had a very special way with patients. Rosemarie Lee, a nurse at the Nevins home, recalled, once there was a difficult case that no nurse seemed able to handle. Once Maud took the case, everything seemed to straighten out and there was no longer any problem. Maud kept on nursing way into her 60s. Now that she is a patient at the Nevins, she's still interested in all the nursing duties. When she sees the nurse readying a cart of medications, she invariably is appalled at all the medications people tend to take now. Back when I started nursing, she said, we never gave so much as a sleeping pill except as a last resort. She also watches over the other patients, particularly one little woman in whom she has a special interest. She does little things for her, like getting her a drink of water or seeing that she gets to bed at the right time. And whenever she saw a nurse wearing her Lawrence General Hospital pin, Maud would put her arm around her and say proudly, "That's my school." It came out that Maud no longer had the pin in which she was so proud. Somewhere, sometime during her long nursing career, it got lost. Nurses at the Nevins were touched at how much a small newspaper article in the Eagle Tribune last September meant to Maud. In 50 years ago, it noted that Maud had retired as a supervisor at Lawrence General Hospital to go into private nursing. Maud got excited when she read it herself and beamed from ear to ear. See, they haven't forgotten me, and obviously Lawrence General was still the biggest thing in her life. That gave them an idea. The administrator, Kenneth Menner, the director, Miss Elaine Clark, Rosemary Lee, and all got the idea of getting another pin for Maud, especially since Lawrence General Hospital School of Nursing would be closing its doors in June. They contacted Mrs. Carol Schultz, nursing school director, who thought it a great idea and promptly ordered the pin for Maud. It was engraved with her initials and the date of her graduation, September 12, 1915. This week, Mary June Walmsley, curriculum coordinator, and 4 student nurses, Paula St. Louis, Patricia McAvoy, Deborah Farrow, and Ann Gremlin, went to the nursing home to give Maud the pin and cap. They weren't exactly the same as hers. Her original pin was a bit larger, and Maud was never donned the pleated and frilled organdy cap which Lawrence General changed over to. All through her nursing years, she had kept the starched white regular cap and starched cotton uniform. She would have nothing to do with the newfangled Easy Care synthetic uniforms. But the difference didn't mean anything. Maud's face was shining with joy as they put the cap atop her graying hair, always kept neat, just as those years when she was on active duty, and showed her the engraving on the bright new pin. Nurses who had served with her, doctors who had admired her quiet efficiency throughout the years, nurses and friends were on hand for the touching ceremony. Those who planned it had forgotten nothing. Just as it was ending, a little girl, dressed as a nurse of the future, Dawn Augusta, 8, presented her with a little gift, a nurse doll dressed in the Red Cross uniform, 1918. Probably Ma Balmer had never been prouder of her chosen profession than she was at that moment. Turning to the little girl, she said, with her heart in her voice, "If you ever do become a nurse, dear, I only hope that you will love it as I do." Next month, we will hear from Nat Stevens about Horatio Rogers.
Hi, my name is Bill Dolan. I'm the coordinator for VFW Post 2104 in North Andover for the Wreaths Across America program this year. To access North Andover's event, using this website will allow individuals or groups of volunteers to register to place wreaths. We'd ask that one individual for any groups of volunteers identify themselves so that we can work with that one person rather than the whole group. This access can also be used to purchase wreaths, which are $17 each, and to designate a family member or significant person who may want to place the wreaths themselves. We need to raise $26,350 to purchase all the wreaths for the 1,550 veterans who are buried at the Ridgewood Cemetery. We need to raise this money by December 3rd. Wreaths Across America is dedicated to remember, honor, and teach about veterans. In this segment, and the others in this series, was created by North Andover CAM to help us reach out and do that. The theme for Wreaths Across America, encompassing nearly 4,500 communities across the country who are laying veterans wreaths on December 14th, is Live with Purpose. The opening ceremony honors all branches of our military with a ceremonial wreath posted for each branch by an active or retired member of that branch, and a wreath to remember the POWs and MIAs. Wreaths will have been placed throughout the cemetery for the 1,550 veterans. If successful, we intend to include all North Andover cemeteries in future years. Live with purpose, and please participate on December 14th.